Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿, and this is episode 185. We've been trying to do some more interviews with incredible people that we know to get to know them better and also to get to introduce you to the Vegan Strong Plant Build team. I have the pleasure of having Bradie with us today, and I honestly, we've competed alongside one another. We've done a lot of stuff together, but I don't know a whole lot about you. I know I was talking to Danny earlier today. I'm like, he's a man of few words, and he just absolutely crushes it. And I'm super curious to see how what we're going to get to find out about you outside of the fact that you have already done so many incredible things at such a young age. So welcome to the podcast, and thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. If you have any questions for us after the fact, I'll let you know where to find Bradie. So what, aside from whatever, like getting into how you got started with all this and what we're up to this year, how's your week been? What have you been up to?
Yeah, so me and my girlfriend, we just relocated to DC. I've helped launch a startup to develop new sustainable proteins. So that's something I've been very busy with. Of course, training has been very time consuming as I gear up for nationals and then the Mr. America comp in August or October, that is.
Okay, so I heard move and developing proteins outside of the stuff that we're already.
Yeah.
Okay. How was the move?
It was very hectic. So I just got my PhD like a month ago.
Okay.
So literally, I think I defended my thesis on like a Wednesday, and then we started moving that Friday to DC. So it was all very hectic. And then, of course, I'm very occupied all the way leading up to my PhD defense. So it's been busy times, but now things are just starting to settle out.
What did you get your PhD in?
I got my PhD in chemical and biomolecular.
Okay, gotcha. And what's life been like after submitting your thesis and getting on the other side of all
Oh,
that?
so much better. It's the quality of life improvement, just it skyrockets after you finish your PhD.
Do you plan on doing any other schooling, academia, work like that outside of being in the workforce and whatnot?
I hope not. I've been in school for, I've been in college for 10 years now, so I'd like to not go back unless I really feel the need to.
Gotcha. And why the move to DC?
A couple of reasons. My girlfriend got a job here. She's a dietitian. It's also sort of strategically locating me in DC as I work with the startup company that's actually based out of Wilmington, Delaware. I can help sort of meet with people in DC to help them fundraise and gain access to new sources of funding for us.
Okay, right on. Cool. Let's see. It was miserable today. It was disgustingly hot and super rainy and super humid, but otherwise, I don't know. I feel like it's been a pretty nice summer over here. I keep watching the clock tick and realizing that it's almost right around the corner. Right at the time that we're recording this, we still have around 11 weeks, but by the time this episode comes out, it'll be like 2, 3, 4 weeks, something like that, out from Mr. America. And I am just beyond excited about the team that we're bringing this year. I was looking at all of our results from all the previous years of competing, and I think 2017 was when we were at our absolute best. We medaled the hardest. We had the largest team. We competed in the most sports. I believe I think we may have medaled harder last year, but I have a feeling this team is just going to absolutely set the bar as far as how competitive we're going to be able to be. And with you stepping up as the team captain, you brought so much fresh new talent and literally stacked the books in every single weight class. I believe the words I remember you saying was something like you want them to feel the pressure in every single weight class category, that there is a vegan that is that competitive, that is likely to win.
That's exactly right. I want them to be scared when they see the Vegan Strong Plant Build team walking in.
And when I think of some of the athletes and the passion that they bring, not just the numbers they put up and how they perform, I would be surprised if the competition wasn't a little bit scared, competition aside.
Yeah, I feel like we should do a quick rundown, like highlighting some of the athletes because there's so much talent here, and I feel like it's my duty as captain to highlight them. So of course, there's myself who won the national championship in powerlifting last year, the USPA drug tested nationals. Then I won Mr. America last year as a middleweight, and fully transitioned to strongman since. Another really talented athlete we're bringing back is 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐫, who of course is the three-time France's strongest woman. And then she's also the world champ at Static Monsters, which is a big strongman comp, which is a max deadlift and a max log lift. Then we're also bringing this year for the first time Tom Butts, who just won World's Strongest Natural Man under 90 kilos. Andrew Keys, English Strongest Natural Man under 80 kilos. We have Rick Carroll, who just won the Northeast Regional Championship, and he has multiple Arnold invites now. We're bringing back Reina Seri, who's a hybrid powerlifter strongman to compete again as a novice. Bringing Melissa Busta, an IFBB pro turned strong woman. 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞, who's a really strong, big potential down the road. She just won the Delaware State Championship, as well as 𝐾𝐭 Ferriet, who's had some massive lifts recently. So we have a very strong team this year. And last year, our strongman team, we brought 7 athletes. We did unfortunately have 1 injury, so really out of the 6 athletes that finished the competition, we had 5 podium finishes, and 3 of them were first place.
Nice. What do you expect this year from your team specifically in comparison to last year?
So the first place finishers at the strongman competition, they get tridents, and I think you can see one back behind you over your shoulder there. So what I want this year, we got 3 tridents last year. I want to beat that this year. I want at least 4, at least. So that's my goal as captain.
Okay, so we get to walk around the casino, hopefully with 2 times the amount of tridents, with the potential to do twice as much damage as we did last year.
Exactly.
That's exciting. I cannot wait to cheer y'all on and to root for you and to see you do your thing in October. So walk me back to how this all got started to you. Did you start playing sports at a young age? What was your interest back then?
So my first love in sports was really football. And actually the started playing football in middle school is because I wanted to get girls. And then I slowly developed the love for the sport. But initially I just wanted to get girls' attention. But then I graduate high school and I went on to play football at a smaller college outside Cleveland. And I get some reps in my very first game of the season. And like within the first couple plays, I fractured my spine, which completely ended my football career right out the gate of college. So I lost scholarship and I had to transfer universities. Ended up at the University of South Carolina, where my family had moved. And there I had really started to develop more of an interest in science and resolving climate change. All the while this was going on, I'm still dealing with severe back pain. My back, it really hadn't fully healed. So when I fractured it, I snapped 2 of the transverse processes off, which are the tips of the vertebrae. So those are just gone now. They dissolved. They're completely removed from my spine. So my back is having some major issues still. Like I'm having trouble just doing day-to-day activities, a lot of physical therapy. So meanwhile, I'm still trying to lift and get my back right. I also start doing research. And in my research, I'm trying to take the carbon emissions driving climate change and convert them into chemicals to mitigate climate change. And meanwhile, while I'm doing this, I realize, looking where the carbon emissions driving climate change are coming from, a major portion of them are coming from animal agriculture. So it didn't feel right for me to be working in the lab, doing all this work to reduce emissions, and then going home and eating a burger. So at this point, I started to get more interested in, I didn't committed oh yeah, I'm going to go vegan at the time. I was like, okay, I'm just going to take out red meat of my diet and see how things go. Of course, I was fine. And then I'm like, okay, maybe I'll push this a step further. And then I remove all meat from my diet, or besides fish, I do a pescatarian step. I'm like, okay, things are going well. I'm the strongest and leanest and the best performing I've ever been. My back's getting better. Then I transition to vegetarian, and of course, slowly get to vegan. So that's my story of how I arrived at veganism. And when I arrived at veganism, of course, I'm getting a lot of criticism from people like, oh, you're never going to be, get stronger as a vegan, this and that. So I'm like, okay, I need to prove people wrong now. So I start competing in powerlifting. So it actually never powerlifted prior to being vegan, which I think is a cool way to sort of prove to people you can build muscle as a vegan and you can get stronger. Um, and you can see over the 5 years I competed in powerlifting, I was getting better and better each year, to where last year I won the U.S. Powerlifting Association drug tested nationals, which I was really proud of. But by that point, I'd actually started to get a little bit sick of powerlifting. And for those of you who don't know, powerlifting is a squat, bench, deadlift. Every single competition, you get 3 attempts and you total your best lifts. Um, and it got kind of old just training those 3 lifts for me. And I sort of missed a lot of the athleticism that I had developed during football that I felt like I wasn't really able to use as a power lifter. So sort of on the side, I would dabble in strongman competitions, just like small fundraiser comps and things like that. But after I won nationals, I felt, I really wanted to make this transition into strongman. And the first major competition I did after that transition into strongman was at Mr. America, which was literally July, August, 3 months after I'd won powerlifting nationals. So within 3 months of transitioning to strongman, I was able to win Mr. America. And actually, thus far, not to jinx anything, I'm still early in my strongman career, but I'm undefeated so far. And now I've just qualified for nationals in strongman, which will be in September. And then right after September, it works out really nicely. Actually, I'll be peaked for nationals. And then a month later, I'll compete at Mr. America as a heavyweight.
Nice. What got you into science and then taking as far as you did to the point where you wound up getting your PhD and then learning about caring for and working in environmental sciences, right? I don't know if I'm saying that right. And then, of course, going vegan, you adopted a plant-based diet for environmental reasons. At what point did it come full circle for you? Were there other reasons that eventually clicked? And what was that like?
Yeah, I think my love for science had always been there ever since a very young age. I had a lot of interest in chemistry. And of course, chemical engineering, which I have a PhD in now, is really just applied chemistry, taking that fundamental knowledge and using it to solve real world problems. And that real world problem I had the most interested in was climate change. I think it's so critical for me just ethically. I've always had a very strong sense of empathy and ethics. And I want to be able to hand off a habitable planet to my future kids and grandkids. That's so important to me. That even while I'm gone, that they'll have something left for them. So that's really where this passion had developed from. And that really goes hand in hand with my veganism as well, because that sort of environmental sense and research is what was allowed me to build that bridge over to veganism. And once that bridge was built, I could begin to see a lot of the health benefits and the animal rights benefits and some of the other aspects of veganism that I didn't have a good of a lens into without that bridge through sustainability.
But you kept up with sports the entire time. And
Yeah,
when
yeah.
found out that you couldn't play football competitively, you decided to get into powerlifting. And obviously you changed the way that you ate. What was the deal with your back and the rehab and how that was working? How did that affect your ability to powerlift?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny. I think it's kind of counterintuitive. Most people would think when you fracture your spine, you should avoid exercises like deadlifts and things like that. I kind of took the opposite approach where I said, I'm just going to build up as much muscle mass as possible to support my spine now. And by doing that, I've completely mitigated all my spinal issues. I never have issues anymore, ever since I've done that. And I continue to deadlift heavy. And that's something I think that most people probably would have taken the opposite approach and eased off, and they never probably would have solved their back issues completely.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So, because I think of strongman, I think of the fact that to me, it seems like it's riskier because you go, from what little I know about your sport, you go and you do all kinds of different things that you don't normally train for. And it's not quite as, I mean, I suppose powerlifting, you're doing the same thing in that repetition could eventually lead to strain and injury. But strongman just seems like it's a whole different beast where, I mean, give me some examples of different events in a strongman competition.
Yeah, so like your main events will be, the big ones are like log lifting, stone lifting, truck pulls. There's no like the fun part about strongman is there's no set criteria for what an event has to be. You can literally make up whatever you want. As long as everybody has to compete in the same thing, it doesn't matter. So every competition is completely different, and you never know what to expect for these events. Whereas powerlifting is very rigid and standardized, so much to the point like they have to be using certain bars and certain plates. Strongman, you don't know what you get till you show up day of sometimes.
Do you see
But yeah,
yourself competing in strongman for like the next 5 to 10 plus years?
yeah, that's my plan. I think it does take a good amount of time to develop, and when you even like going from powerlifting to strongman, that is a pretty big jump. Like there's a lot of technique and things I'm still developing on certain lifts, just because there's so many lifts now in strongman. So I take that sort of powerlifting mindset of like perfecting my technique on each lift and now applying it to these strongman lifts. And really, I'm kind of starting from scratch every competition. Like, all right, let's learn the technique this lift and this lift. So it keeps things interesting. It's both mentally and physically stimulating for me, which is
All
why I
right.
think I enjoy it so much.
Here's an interesting question. Say someone doesn't have access to a strongman specific gym and they have not actively lifted in a long time, or maybe they're just brand new to lifting and they want to get into strongman. What do they do?
I say your best two options are either find a CrossFit gym. So a lot of CrossFit, they've started to adopt a lot of the strongman lifts. So a lot of times CrossFit gyms now will have yokes and they'll have farmer handles and logs. Your other option is if you have access to, I assume everyone can probably drive to the woods or a park somewhere. Just go find some heavy rocks and some heavy logs. I've literally seen professional strongmen go to the woods and train that way.
That's wild. You literally just grab whatever you can find in nature and just start training. What about programming? Do you just start messing around and lifting heavy, awkward things? Do you get a little more detailed with how you're doing it at some point after you get interested in seeing what you can lift?
So when I power lifted, I did all my own programming, all my coaching, because I was able to take, my programming from one comp and then reapply it to the next and just make slight tweaks. In strongman, I honestly just don't have the bandwidth or the time to like do complete programming from scratch for every competition I do. And I'll compete maybe 4 or 5 times a year. So I've hired a coach now to handle that for me.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to think back to when I was a kid, because I know I definitely had that period of time where I did things to for girls to be interested in me, but I don't think, well, no, I wanted to look a certain way, not necessarily because I played tennis, but I wanted to
Mm,
look a certain way. And I think that's what led to me doing bodybuilding. Eventually,
yeah.
that idea of looking a certain way so girls would notice me. But then
Hmm.
eventually you fall in love with the sport that you're doing more than whatever it brings you externally because you just enjoy it. And to me, it's just super interesting how you pivoted from three different sports. And it's just like quite the transition,
I'll
really.
say that's actually not in strongman. That's not all that uncommon. Strongman is such a versatile sport that the people that do the best are generally very athletic. They have, a background in multiple sports before they get to strong. Like Mitchell Hooper, for example, probably the top strongman out there right now in terms of consistency. He ran marathons, he powerlifted. I think he also played football and some other sports before he actually got to strongman and being the top strongman today.
So being more competitive, the results speak for themselves, right? It's a conversation opener and people start to ask you questions about how you eat and why you do what you do. But what are your hopes when those conversations come your way and people are like, wow, you're undefeated. Why are you doing this and how are you so competitive? What do you hope to achieve by being a vegan activist?
I think that the main thing I hope to achieve is that I think there's a lot of people that are considering plant-based diets, but they'll immediately push it aside saying, okay, I can never be strong and athletic on a diet like this. And then they see me, and then this is a complete paradigm shift from what they've been taught for so long, or what they've seen from, social media and things like that. So I really just want to challenge people's beliefs and really prevent them from having the excuse of, I can't be strong or athletic. I'm an athlete. I can't go vegan. That simply isn't true. So I don't want that to be a reason to prevent anyone from adopting a plant-based diet.
What are some common questions that other athletes wind up asking you?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say the questions are all that different from public questions you could ask. Of course, the common one is where do you get your protein, things like that. I get that one very commonly. But I will say it's kind of interesting. I get more questions and more kind of confusion um, and pushback from the general public than I would from like top level athletes. The higher level athletes I'm around, they kind of just get it, and maybe they appreciate my performance more, and understand how macronutrients work a little bit better, to where they don't question it quite as much as the general public would, which is interesting.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So one thing that I find particularly interesting about strongman is that there doesn't seem to be any tested divisions out there, or am I wrong?
So there is one that's launched fairly recently, and Tom Butts has been pretty involved with them.
Hmm.
So there's the World's Strongest Natural Man Federation. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but they've launched fairly recently, and they're still kind of growing. But generally, no, the vast majority of like the main top strongman federations are not drug tested.
How do you feel about that, and why do you think that is?
Um, a lot of it has to do with the history of strongman. So strongman is a sport that literally developed from a TV show. So the World's Strongest Man was the show that launched the sport of strongman. So prior to that show, there was no sport. They literally just wanted to take, all the top strong men from different sports, football and wrestling and Olympic lifting, and just see who the strongest was. And then they kept doing that each year. And suddenly it started to become a sport that people would actually train for and specialize just in competing in that. And when they started that, they made the decision not to have it drug tested, probably just due to cost, to be honest. They probably just didn't want to deal with the extra cost of drug testing athletes. But all of those athletes that competed in the original World's Strongest Man were drug tested in their own individual sport. Um, so yeah, it's kind of interesting. And nowadays, I'd say people, it's a lot of times it's for the viewers. Like the viewers just want to see these like massive, bulky monsters competing at World's Strongest Man. So they don't want to impose drug testing on them. Um, but I'll say if strongman was drug tested, it would be nice. It would be a very good sport for the Olympics because it is done very much on an international basis. Like it's not just a US dominant sport. Like it's very big in Europe.
Gotcha. Do you see that being a possibility? Do you see the tested side of it growing?
I think it'll grow, but I think the untested will always be bigger unless they decide to drug test across the board, which I don't see happening anytime soon, but that could change.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's such a gray area, and it seems certain sports you just wind up getting to the top and then eventually testing becomes required. But it's almost like you wind up getting to the top and you probably do a couple things to get there, depending on the sport, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting. What I love about our team is that we are, in fact, all natural athletes and PED free, which is really cool. I just wonder what that is like when you're competing against athletes who are not.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. It's definitely possible for, drug-free athletes to go head to head with athletes that aren't PEDs. PEDs sort of, I guess the best way to describe it is I'd say they probably unlock more potential for you as an athlete, but they don't necessarily guarantee you're going to be a better athlete, if that makes sense. Like you still have to put in that same amount of work, and if a drug-free athlete is still putting in that work and staying ahead of you, you might not necessarily just beat them by default. Like I know people who have gone on PEDs and just like not really worked out, just assuming it would make them stronger. That's not really how it works. from what I understand.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I find that particularly interesting because it almost seems like we have our work cut out for us as a team because we are natural athletes, but not to say that everyone out there is on PEDs, but there's bound to be some athletes that you compete against that are not drug-free. And yet,
Oh yeah, I'd say once you get to the like when I'm at nationals competing, the majority of the men I'll be competing against will be on PEDs, without a doubt.
and you're winning.
Yeah, generally, so far so good.
So it's like it's hard for me to do the math on that. It just doesn't make sense. But here you are.
Yeah, yeah. I think it also helps I compete usually as a middleweight.
Hmm.
And the middleweights really can lean more into being more athletic and getting advantages that way. Whereas once you get into the weight classes that just don't have a top end on the weight, like the super heavyweights, you can just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas I have a top end for my weight. I can't weigh any more than I do now. So I just have to get more athletic, develop better technique, and find edges where I can there.
Gotcha. All right. So what's a typical day for you? How do you usually like to eat well for your sport and just to enjoy? What's breakfast
Yeah.
food?
So
Yeah.
I've kind of done an overhaul of my diet for nationals this year a little bit.
Mhm.
So I've really tried to lean more into improving my food quality. I wouldn't say I'm completely like a whole food plant-based vegan, but a lot closer to that than I was before. So one thing I do with a lot of my food is I tend to eat a lot of my calories in liquid form, and that's something I learned both from Patrick Balumian and Rick Carroll, who's on our team. Um, he eats a lot of his meals in completely liquid form. He'll just blend things together. I'm not quite as crazy with him, like blending up vegetables and rice and tofu and things like that. I can't drink that, but in the morning I will just take like oats, flaxseed, chia seed, hemp seed, add some maple syrup, cinnamon, and a banana and blend that up, and then eat some like avocado toast on the side. And basically by blending things up and putting it in liquid form, it's just kind of pre-digesting my food a little bit. Because once you start to need to consume, 4,000 plus calories a day, it gets really hard to do that on a whole food plant-based diet. It starts to be challenging to digest the sheer volume of that food. But if you just blend some of that up, it takes out some of the digestive work. So that's what I'll do for my breakfast. Then I'll usually have a protein shake sometime after that. For lunch, my lunch will vary week to week quite a bit, but lately I've been big into doing like falafel on pita with some hummus, kale, rice, and eating that all together. Then usually throwing in some fruit on the side. Then in the afternoon, I'll have a snack of usually some nuts and dark chocolate. Um, and then I'll throw in some berries typically. And then once I get to dinner, this is usually the largest meal. I'll make a giant stir fry of rice and tofu, mushrooms, and essentially whatever vegetables I feel like having that week. And then I'll also make a giant smoothie, probably about half a gallon smoothie of mixed berries and beets, orange juice, and protein powder. And that's sort of what I'll eat in a day.
Okay. So you're blending up the fruit after dinner, and then you're starting in the morning with blending up different kinds of food, I think. Right.
Yeah, so I would take oats and seeds,
Yeah.
soy milk,
Yeah.
banana, and blend that up. So basically, places where it's still palatable for me to consume my meals in liquid form, I'll do it in liquid form. But I don't do anything like too gross.
Some people will literally liquefy all their meals for the whole day.
Yeah, yeah. Like if you get the chance to talk to Rick, you'll ask him about his meals that he just has in jars. It's just, whatever he has laying around that he just blends up, vegetables, lentils, whatever.
He's eating more than you, though. He must be.
We probably eat about the same. I
Okay.
mean, we compete in the same weight class. We're about the
Okay.
same size. So,
Okay. He just does it like that. That's just his thing.
well, I think that's just his work style. I believe he work. I don't want to speak, but I believe he works for like a moving company. So he's like
Right.
on the go a lot and needs to be able to like slam his
Yes.
meals down quickly in the car. And
Mm.
that's what works for him.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you have a little more access to be able to prepare your food in a little more of an enjoyable way. You have a little more
Yeah.
time on your hands. But if you didn't, that might be a different way to get it done. So
Yeah.
blending up at least 30% of your food, especially when you're eating whole food, mostly whole food plant-based because you can more easily digest everything and you can fit it in without having a super full stomach. Um,
Yeah, if you have to eat a lot of calories, that's the easiest
mhm,
way to do it for sure. Now, if you're like trying to cut and like minimize your caloric intake, definitely don't take that approach. But
gotcha. How much protein do you aim for?
um, I'd say like I don't track very closely. So I'll track, but only every once in a while, just to kind of gauge where I'm at. But my protein intake is probably 200 to 250 grams a day, but it varies quite a bit.
Okay, gotcha. So probably maybe a little more than a gram of protein per pound of body weight
Yeah, on a high day, yeah.
on a high day.
But I compete at 231 pounds
Gotcha,
typically.
gotcha. Do you wind up gaining and losing weight for competitions?
Yeah, so I'm starting to like walk around closer to 250. So like I have a pretty big cut to get down to 231. Eventually, I'm working with my coach and I am going to push to go into heavyweight completely. So essentially what I'll do is for big competitions like nationals, I'll cut to middleweight. But it'd be too much to do that cut again for Mr. America, so I'm competing as a heavyweight at Mr. America. So I compete both. I compete both middleweight and heavyweight, depending on how it makes sense for what I can weight cut for.
All right, I want to try to have a little fun here. Tell me a crazy story that revolves around you competing, something weird that you didn't expect to happen on competition day and what it was like. Do you have a story like that?
Ooh, let me think. So one funny thing that happened, I don't know if it's funny, it was kind of scary. In my qualifier for nationals, so we wear when we do the stone lift, right? We wear it like tacky. It's like tricep on our arms. But I guess I had actually put too much on, which I didn't think was possible. So I went to put the stone up on the shelf and I literally got stuck to it. I couldn't get my arms off of it. So as I pulled off, I finally got off of it. The stone about rolled back on top of me. I had to like push it back, which killed my stone run time. But luckily, I still ended up placing first. So that was kind of a weird moment that I didn't expect.
So, like, what was going on in your mind when you were basically stuck to this stone and you were trying to put it down, aside from the fact that you might not win if it didn't work
Yeah, I
out?
was kind of panicking because that never happened to me before, and I knew this was a timed event, so it was kind of hurting my time. And then I moved to the next stone, and I just hear the crowd like scared because they can see the stone rolling back on top of me.
So there is some calculated and also not calculated risk. Some things can actually go down.
Yeah, and because so the thing is, the Atlas stones I'd been training with, I needed a lot of extra tacky on them because they were kind of like grimy and dirty. These ones were very clean stones, so I stuck to it a lot more, and that's one thing I didn't consider. So like one of the first things I do when I get to strongman competition now is I'll go and like evaluate all of the equipment we're about to use and like feel it out and look at it very closely.
Yeah. So that's the thing I think about when it comes to sports where agility comes into play. I feel like the gear, obviously, you can control that variable, but things can, in fact, happen if you move the wrong way or if something, I don't know, it just seems a bit unpredictable in that regard. Have you ever seen anything like crazy happen that didn't go someone's way?
I mean, yeah, I've seen some like nastier
Yeah.
injuries.
Yeah.
So I did a fundraiser competition recently where we were carrying like a 600-pound frame, which is basically farmers, but it's all attached. It's sort of like a trap bar deadlift. Carrying it uphill. And there was like a younger kid doing it, and he tripped and dropped it on his toe. It completely fractured it, like bone popping out of his toe, like screaming. It was pretty bad. That's probably the nastiest injury I've seen, luckily.
The
So
thing
nothing
that
worse.
I am most impressed about when it comes to athletes who are super competitive is that it doesn't matter if they get hurt. It doesn't affect them emotionally. Like they're looking to see how they can get to the next competition and recover from it because that's the mindset of a competitive athlete, right? Whether
Yeah,
it's a
100%.
shoulder replacement or whether their foot is broken, whether their clavicular bone got broken, whether their synthetic spinal disc replacement got taken out and they got to put another one in, whatever it is, there's all kinds of crazy, potentially even career ending injuries. But one way or another, that athlete finds a way to keep that mindset. I was thinking about what comes to mind for me right now is just how even when you can't do it, like you don't lose that heart, you don't lose that ambition. There was some dude, a veteran, he must have been like 70 or 80, had a whole team cheering him on, and he could like barely move a muscle. But whatever he could do to finish the 5K that we were at, Boulder, he was doing. And you could just tell it was like, you know, you just have the heart and the mind of an athlete. But ideally, you keep going and you don't get a career-ending injury. But you know, we have a lot of athletes like that on our team that are just going to keep going. I feel like it's got to be a hard concept to know, like, okay, you're hurt, you're injured, you're badly injured, but you're going to keep pushing because your goal is to get to the next competition.
Yeah. So when I competed in April, when I qualified for nationals, I was actually competing on a torn meniscus in my knee. So that my surgery to repair this was literally the week after my qualifier competition. I worked with my surgeon and my doctors to literally schedule it the week after. And I did work closely with them to like, so prepping for that competition, I basically had one good knee and I had to rework my technique for every event so that I wouldn't damage the meniscus on. So I had to do certain things like stack my joints properly and all my technique changed. For the stones, you know, I couldn't squat down to pick up the stones. I had to do like a straight leg deadlift to lift the stones. So anything to avoid basically squatting down in the events, I did. And I ended up winning that competition despite having that injury. And now I'm honestly, within 2 months of that surgery, I'm 100% fully recovered, already setting new PRs. Knee doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, stories like that to me are super inspiring because they show others what you can truly be capable of. You can work through things while getting more athletic. You can work through things while becoming more competitive. It's just a different path, potentially a little bit of a riskier and scarier path. But if you do it right and you try your best to work through things, you can, like you're living proof. You can get on the other side of it and still recover from your injury and do what you have to do. It's just a matter of where your priorities are and what you're willing to do to get there. So that, to me, those kinds of stories are incredibly inspiring because when someone gets hurt, it's the controllable that I feel like people enjoy the most because you're active, it feels good, and it's hard to do the things you need to do to recover and focus. But that's the stuff. Like that's what's going to get you on the other side of it, not just being bummed out over the fact you can't train the same way. So, you know, it's admirable that you were able to do that. And to me, that's, again, like some of the most inspiring stories that I've heard of are people just like that. Yeah, totally. What else, Bradie? So tell me, is there like a shelf life to how long you can do your sport?
So strongman's kind of an interesting sport because most people, they peak probably around sometime in their 20s. Strongman, guys usually peak, you know, closer to their 40s, like 35 to 40 range, because it just takes so long to develop that base strength and muscle mass that you need to do well in strongman. So the careers tend to be a little longer for the guys that do well. Now, of course, that longer career means you have a lot more time for injuries too. So there's sort of that downside of it. But it's, you know, basically the goal for me is to stay healthy and then keep progressing and getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And knowing by the time I hit 35, which I'm 27 now, I'll be very competitive and hopefully competing at the highest level of strongman.
Nice. There's your ultimate goal. Cool. How can our listeners and watchers find you in the future?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram at VeganHercules. Then I'm also on TikTok at VeganHercules.
Vegan Hercules, right on. And I'll put that in the show notes. I thank you so much for your time today. You're a very busy person and you're already contributing so much to what we're doing. I'm super psyched to watch your team and cheer you all on. And I'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Vegan Proteins, Muscles by Brussels Radio. Feel free to reach out to Bradie at Vegan Hercules on TikTok and on Instagram. And of course, you can reach out to us at Muscles by Brussels and at Vegan Proteins on all the socials. You can also hit the contact button on VeganProteins.com for anything, including coaching, and we'll be getting back to you right away. Once again, my name is 𝐮𝐿. This is Bradie, and we'll talk to you soon.